Okay, is this working? Okay, hopefully this is working. Welcome to uh, the first live stream of my exciting open source work. Um, Let me know if there are problems with the stream. I don't really know what I'm doing. And hopefully you find this interesting though. I'm going to walk through some forum topics, which are usually like support or help threads, and then some issues and um, maybe a bug. Actually, there's the exciting bug of the mysterious disappearing certificate that I think I figured out this week. So um, let's get started. I don't really know how to. I'll check the comments occasionally, and maybe my Twitter occasionally, and hopefully this won't be a super long stream. I don't know how long the delay is. It's probably at least 10 seconds. So just be patient with me as I figure out how to engage with you guys. And let me know if you have any preferences for future streams. So anyway, you can see here I've got my GitHub up. So we're going to be looking at a few updated issues today and maybe a pull request. And in the forum, we've got 4 new topics this morning, or updated topics. And then I found a couple of, I got alerts for a couple of random things on Reddit. So we will go through those, I guess. This is very unfiltered, very improvised, and makes me a little uncomfortable. But let's start in GitHub. Actually, let's start in the forum. I'm really curious about this. Error TLS alert, internal error. This is the case of the mysterious disappearing certificate. And so let's start at the beginning and give you guys a quick intro as to what's going on. Basically, this person has this pretty big Caddy file, and they're using a lot of imports, and they have a variety of hard-coded domains like this and this, but they also have let's see here. They also have on-demand TLS enabled, meaning that they don't know or specify all the domain names, but Caddy is able to obtain and manage certificates on demand as needed on this port, which is really cool, and that's a great use case for Caddy. You can scale to tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of certificates for your customers' domain names, for your customer sites. That's a really neat white labeling kind of feature that's free, and it's just really easy to set up. Importantly, they have the ask endpoint configured so that it can't be abused. So this is an endpoint that presumably checks their database to see if a domain name is associated with a customer. And if so, Caddy will be allowed to manage a certificate for it. So they have, the important thing to understand is they have a mix of hard-coded domain names that Caddy's managing certificates for, and the on-demand domain names. So problem is, about once per month, after days of running just fine, the site becomes unreachable. This particular site, this is one of the hard-coded domain names in the config, and the clients are getting internal errors, and on the Caddy side, they're getting this error, no certificate available. And that's concerning because there was a certificate available, and then suddenly there's not. And so what is causing, now after a restart it works. So this person has been very good about filling out the help template and giving us the logs we need. And you can see we've had quite a back and forth here. Certificate still exists in disk. And so I'm like, this is weird. So Francis he's usually pretty on point. His hunch is that the domain was, the certificate for the hard-coded domain was evicted from the in-memory cache to make room for others. And that actually turned out to be correct. And he is right. If that happens, Caddy should still find it from a file, but there's some kind of edge case. So actually, he was spot on here. There isn't a limit to how many certificates Caddy can manage, but there is, of course, a limit to how many certificates Caddy can load into memory, because memory is finite. So, so we went back and forth and tried to narrow this down a little bit, and kind of confirm theories before because this is a tricky thing to kind of replicate and debug. So what happens is a few days later, a day later, I think I figured out what's going on. So let's open this up. When Caddy gets a TLS handshake and it sees that it needs a certificate, it calls this function getCertificate. This is a function signature defined by the Go standard library. And first we check for the TLS ALPN Acme challenge and serve, that's a special case where we serve a special certificate. But we, we aren't doing that in this case, so we can just skip down to here. Get cert during handshake, which, does this go to? Okay, nice. Get cert during handshake. First, we'll check the in-memory cache to see if we've already loaded it. Now, that domain name that's hard-coded into the config should already have the certificate in memory. So this should just work, but clearly that's not happening. So we know that it's coming here, get name from client hello, where we get the server name from the TLS handshake. And then if on-demand TLS is enabled, we might be able to load or obtain the needed certificate. And this is the key, I think. When I implemented this, I did not anticipate the edge case that I'm going to explain here in a minute. So if on-demand TLS is enabled, which it is in his config, but the important thing to note is that TLS configs in Caddy are they depend on the host name. So he has not enabled on-demand TLS for the hard-coded domains like image.lemlist. Whatever the domain was. He only enabled on-demand TLS for everything else. So Caddy shouldn't be managing certificates for the known hard-coded domains on demand. And that's probably good. Like if you control the domain names, you shouldn't be doing it on demand because it's a little trickier to debug and like there's no need for it on demand. So just don't use it if you don't need it. So for this config value, CFG, this config value is specific to the domain name on hand here, the same one from the client hello. So on-demand is not enabled for this domain, therefore it is nil. Therefore this whole block is skipped. Well, that's a problem because this is the block that will load the certificate into memory if it's not in memory. Well, why is it not in memory? And that's kind of the interesting thing that I hadn't considered was that, so here I'm explaining this, what I just told you. Now, the in-memory cache has a maximum capacity. This is so your server doesn't deplete all of your physical memory or virtual memory. And that defaults to, I think, 10,000. And so when that many certificates are loaded, we do have to evict one, which we do at random just for simplicity and performance. And it actually works fine, except that we do remove any certificate to make room for another, not just any on-demand certificate. And so it's possible that certificates for domains which appear in your config that are not managed on demand can actually be removed from the memory, the cache in memory. And that's problematic in this case. So Francis was right. And so I propose this fix over here. because the problem is once the non-on-demand certificate is removed, there's no way to get it back, because this code I just showed you only gets it back if on-demand is enabled. So my proposed fix, which we did merge, was to check the cache size. And we will load the certificate dynamically if on-demand is enabled, or if the cache size is at capacity. So if the cache is full, then that means that there's a good chance that a certificate has been removed from the cache. Therefore, even if the certificate isn't being managed dynamically, we should still be able to load it from memory. And that should just bring it right back into the cache when it's needed. Voila, problem solved. So this was a few weeks, wow, over a month ago now. The problem is that it occurred again, and I'm really disappointed. I'm like, dang, I'm using the right binary. Like, that should have been the problem. So he got more logs to it. This guy's been really helpful. Got more logs. I added a bunch of logging since this commit here, like a ton of debug logging. And let's, I don't know if maybe I can find that. Debug logging. More debug logging. So debug logging when a certificate has already been cached, or when a cache is full, we're evicting a random certificate, adding a certificate to cache. I'm like, okay, sanity check, is this actually what's going on? So I just added a ton of logging when we remove certificates from cache, and then in theory, by reviewing the full logs, we can pinpoint what the bug was. I also added this one. If there is no match still, then I just add a whole bunch of the stuff to the log. And also here, oh yeah, that is the, oh yeah, this is more debug logging. I had to update some tests to, oh yeah, to accommodate logging here. And so, yeah, just really wanted to get a lot of inspection of the TLS handshake process. So he deployed the updated, like the patch version that had a lot of logging, thankfully, and finally, this was 2 days ago, he was able to post the complete logs. And I didn't really understand at first. There are 2 blocks here. He's grepping for image.lemlist.com, which was the domain, one of the hard-coded domains, the one that was removed, and the problematic one. And then they were related to this on-demand domain name, and this doesn't appear in the config. So I took these log entries and I put them into just into this little editor window, and then I sorted them alphabetically after removing the level, which appeared like right here, and threw off the ordering. And can you see this when I switch my screen? I'm just, okay, hopefully you can see the editor window. Hang on, let me double check. Maybe, okay, good, it looks like you can. So, so now the logs are in order, and .lemlist.com. So here's all the instances of image.lemlist.com. You can see that the cache is full. So our theory was right. Francis' original theory was right. The cache is full, we're evicting the random certificate, and we're removing that one, and it's gone from the cache. And the problem is that future handshakes, you can see then, oh, that this domain is put into the cache. So indeed, the theory is right. We're making room for this on-demand certificate by removing this non-on-demand certificate. But then with the change I made, if the cache is full, you would expect that this should be re-added to the cache. And you can see that for 6 seconds, it wasn't. And the certificate was still missing. And that's weird because it should have just loaded it right away. Like, why wait 6 seconds? But you can see that it does actually get loaded back into the cache. It just took a while. I was like, oh, that's weird. But if you look at the logs carefully, you'll see that the certificate for trail.pixelpenguinmedia.live is loaded into the cache, but it's expired. So if you look at the expiration, it's before the timestamp. And you can see here that it, I think one of these log messages shows you the amount of time left. Oh yeah, remaining, it's a negative value. So this is a domain name that hasn't been used in a while. It's an on-demand one. We haven't seen handshakes for it for a while, or the ask endpoint is rejecting this domain name. So maybe this customer or this user is no longer using this domain name, and so Caddy shouldn't manage a certificate for it anymore. And it's normal to still get handshakes for domain names that are like no longer in use. Clients can do whatever they want after all. So in this case, a client is trying this domain at the server and thinking it will work, and it's not going to, because the backend, it turns out, is so it is rejecting that. And you can see here that certificate for hostname is not allowed. The ask endpoint returned a non-200 status. So the backend ask endpoint is rejecting this domain name, and then it's being removed from the cache immediately at that point. So it's being loaded into the cache. We check the expiration, see that it needs renewal because it is expired, and but we're not allowed to renew it, and so we evict it from the cache. And this is where the second bug, I guess, the bug in my proposed fix comes in, and that is that a cache that was full, that had 10,000 certificates in it, now only has 9,999. And so the cache is no longer full. And so that logic where, well, this is my currently patched version now, but the logic where I check to see if the cache size was equal to the capacity or greater somehow, wasn't working because 9,999 is less than 10,000, so the cache isn't full. And that's because this edge case of loading a expired certificate and then immediately evicting it again, and it took about 6 seconds for because this domain was tried several times by clients at the same time as image.lemlist.com, and it just so happened that because the cache operations are synchronized, and it just so happens that loading this domain or loading this certificate is a single atomic operation, and so it then unlocks and allows this one to be loaded. And when that happened at the same time, and the scheduler made that happen, and the TLS handshakes came in at just the right times, it was able to reload this certificate. But that was just lucky that it actually only took 6 seconds. So, anyway, that was, I guess, the second problem. And so, okay, the question is, well, shoot, okay, so then I explain this here basically in my reply, where, yeah, the cache size is not actually equal to or greater than the capacity. It's one short, because the certificate that was loaded to replace the one we evicted was also evicted. And so we could just remove the cache full condition and just always check storage for a domain name that's requested, even if it's not on demand. And that's fine. I don't love that idea because of the performance penalty for those TLS handshakes that are, like, it just would involve a lot of hitting storage, hitting disk usually, or any other storage backend. It doesn't seem super ideal. Oh, I'm just seeing comments now. Is there, Mohammed asks, is there a technical reason why the cache eviction strategy isn't LRU, or just for simplicity's sake? Would LRU been less problematic in this scenario? Great question. Yeah, let's see. It probably would have been in this case, but that would have also just been kind of luck. There's no guarantee that a hard-coded domain name is frequently used and an on-demand domain name is infrequently used. So in this particular case, it's probably, but again, it would have been luck. Also, that involves more memory requirements, and I really love random eviction. I have kind of a crush on random eviction. I think it actually does work out really well in a lot of cases and is very simple. So That's why we do that. Anyways, so if I remove this condition, I would also have to remove this one, because this is the condition that caused the bug in the first place. Therefore, I would actually just remove this entire half of the if statement. Load if necessary is true. That's just to prevent infinite loops. I won't get into that right now, but or infinite recursion. So I would just basically remove this, and I don't love this idea because that would always, anytime a TLS handshake comes in, it would hit disk to see if any domain name has a certificate. And I mean, that's fine. It's just a lot of hitting disk, a lot of I/O potentially. And so the solution I decided to come up with, well, I haven't committed this yet, maybe I should do this now, is still check the cache size and see if it's greater than the capacity, but only 75% of the capacity. So in theory, if 25% of the certificates, which is a lot of them, are being served on demand and are reloaded into the cache and they're expired and immediately evicted. So basically you could have this scenario that I just talked about happen for 25% of the cache very actively, very and it should still, so basically if the cache is almost full, then it's okay to check storage. But if you're only serving like 5 domain names and you don't have any that are on-demand TLS, because we don't know in this context whether on-demand TLS is enabled for any other domain names. We just have the config for the current domain. And so, yeah, so I'm wondering if if you're only serving a few domain names, they're all hard-coded in your config, then we never need to go to storage. I don't think. So assuming that's right, we can still maintain the performance of not going to disk all the time. I mean, this could probably be 90% or 95%. I don't know. What are the chances that so many of them are going to be expired and going through storage? I don't know what this value should be. Should we try 75? Because if we try 75 and then people complain about performance issues, it might be a bit obscure. I don't know, but they could complain at 90% too. It would be super edge casey, but I don't know. I think that's a fair enough fix. Okay, so his reply today, I haven't seen yet, is, doesn't it make more sense to first check the ask endpoint and then evict the entry from the cache if the response is 200? Why not prevent not on-demand cert be removed from the cache? Always pick an on-demand cert when cache is full. Okay, these are both great questions. So the first question, he's asking, why not just check the ask endpoint when you load the certificate into memory? And we could do that. Or basically only load it into the cache if, in the first place, if the ask endpoint returns a 200. Yeah, and I mean, maybe we should do that. I'm not going to do that right now in this stream, but I'm going to consider that today. Because I'm wondering what complexity that might add to the code base in relation to renewal logic, which is currently the only time we check the ask endpoint. But maybe we should check it when before we even load it. Why even load it into memory? If Caddy's not allowed to manage a certificate for it, why is it allowed to load it in the first place and serve it? Maybe it's not. I don't know. Maybe you would want to serve a certificate to the end of its lifetime, even if you no longer manage it. That's kind of a, yeah, I don't know. So, but why not prevent the non-on-demand certificates from being removed from the cache? So always pick on-demand certs when the cache is full. Well, one answer is that it might not always be on-demand certificates that fill your cache. And two, it might be very complicated to do that. So with random eviction, it's great because we just randomly choose one and there's not even a second question. We can just evict that. If we add conditions, then it gets a little dicey. There's this code in the Go standard library for creating a temporary folder or file and assigning it a random number, and it's in a for loop that iterates like 10,000 times and tries, I don't know if it increments a counter or if it does a random number. I think it just does a random number, but up to 10,000 times, because it has to check disk to see if that file or folder is already used. And like if it just was unlucky picking a random number that was already in use, and it like tries 10,000 times or something. And we would have to do something like that for this suggestion, because we would have to randomly pick one, see if it's on demand, and if it is, or if it isn't, then try again. And we would have to try that. I mean, what if 9,000 of the 9,005 certificates in the cache are not on demand? I mean, there's nothing that says that on demand is the majority of the certificates. That's probably the case in most cases, but you would have a less than, yeah, you would have like a 0.5% chance or 0.01% chance or something of actually being like finding a certificate you could evict. And I guess we could just, yeah, anyway, it's complicated and it like involves a lot of looping with random eviction. We could keep a separate list of all the non-on-demand certificates, but then we have to use more memory, and I don't love that idea either. So we are trading off simplicity here. I'm going for simplest and most performant, and I think the solution will work where we allow the cache some. We know that a full cache won't always be 100% full, but we expect it will be, I don't know, 90%. I might do 90. That sounds reasonable, right? Anyway, I'll bike shed that later. So that is the case of the mysterious disappearing certificate, and I think we've solved that. So hopefully, I'm going to commit and push that later. So I will come back to that. I've got some on-demand TLS questions here. Francis has been helping Pascal here with on-demand TLS. Oh, now it looks like he's beyond the on-demand TLS issues, and he's I haven't followed this thread super close. I don't actually follow most threads really close, especially if someone else is helping, because I have a lot going on. Okay, yeah, so it looks like he's having Caddy file issues, and then maybe DNS issues. Oh, so things are working now by switching to DigitalOcean, but they didn't work in AWS. So, and this happens a lot. Like, a lot of people think that there's an issue with Caddy or with their config, but there's really not. Like, their config might be fine, Caddy is fine, but usually it's something about the environment or the network configuration or the firewall or the DNS. I'm not even kidding. The majority of our support issues are often those kinds of problems. So I don't know. We may never know. I mean, he completely switched providers and it started working. So, I mean, it works on AWS. I'm sure, like, I've run Caddy on AWS EC2 and it's fine. But AWS is also so complicated and you really have to know what's going on there. So if you're kind of messing around with stuff or following tutorials and you don't really know the implications on a lot of things, like, just be very aware of things that are changing, because you can break your server setup. Okay, this is a reply to a wiki post that I wrote about explaining how to use on-demand TLS. And wiki replies should be focused on the actual article and not like getting help on that topic. So for personal websites with independent, so you can see we split out quite a few topics here that were more like help questions. For personal websites with independent domain names, on-demand TLS seems to be useless. Yes, that is probably the case. Because if you are just serving your own personal sites and you have your own domain names, I don't think you need Caddy to manage them on demand because you know the domain names, so you can just put them in your config. If you know, and control. These are different. These are different. You might know the domain names, like your customers might tell you, this is my domain name, but you really need to control the domain name in order for you to be able to put it in your Caddy file config, because only you know when the DNS has been properly set up and can get a certificate for it. So I might split that out into a separate topic. Then again, maybe this is good because I don't necessarily clarify the use case for on-demand TLS in the article. And so maybe this is a feedback on the article itself. I'll think about this, but I probably should clarify the use cases for on-demand TLS. You know, we know that Fathom Analytics, Transistor FM, ODear, and several others are using it. And yeah, so, but in our documentation does explain this. Let's see, automatic HTTPS. Ta-da, there it is. So if you go down to on-demand TLS, we explain the use cases for it, but then we link to the wiki article as to how to actually set it up. Oops. So anyways, there's that. Docker Caddy issues. I can already tell this is going to be fun because I don't use Docker, and so I leave it up to others to help with Docker issues usually. But I also can tell you that the vast majority of Docker, hang on one second here, let me, okay. The vast majority of Docker deployments are more complicated than they need to be. Caddy does not need to be containerized. I understand why people use Caddy in containers, but it's really not necessary. So I got a fun username here. Docker says Caddy is running. I type Caddy command and get command not found. Okay. So the help template here is not filled out. So I don't know what his config is. I can't access Caddy from the browser. The page with Caddy askew. I know what page he's talking about. There's like a template that we like, your site is working, you know, default page. It's running in Docker and I can't access it. I Googled for a while, don't know what to try. Well, I don't know what to tell him honestly because, okay, so he's using, this looks kind of broken. It looks like there's an edit history here. He Googled for a while, that was the edit, okay. I don't know really what to do here because this looks incomplete. So this is a Docker run command, caddy reverse proxy -- from, and then it like stops. But there should be some address here, some value for this argument. This is, I guess he put this up here. Okay, and then he repeated it here. And then there's no config. I guess, okay, there's no config because he's using the reverse proxy command. He didn't post the error messages or the log output, so I don't know what's happening. I mean, this is a broken command. I'm gonna let, maybe I'll answer this later, or I'll let Francis answer this, because again, I don't really know how this works, how Docker works. But there's definitely something wrong. There should be a you look at the command line, reverse proxy command, from, you need an address after it. I mean, so that's a problem. Okay, so I'll reply maybe when I'm not live. All right, let's finish up soon. Ooh, new notification. It doesn't, oh, great. Doesn't seem to work. Well, let's start there, shall we? So this is in the replace response plugin. This plugin is basically kind of, it runs a filter on the response body, so you can replace content in the response body, like replace foo with bar, or you can do a regular expression replacement, or you can do it in streaming mode, and then it also supports the Caddy file. So he's using this plugin, and oh, interesting. So it's got debug mode enabled, thankfully. Oh, using environment variables for the domain name. Trying to filter some content coming from Google's, some Google site. Oh, because he's reverse proxying Google. This is a common use case. A lot of people set Caddy up as a proxy for sites that are often blocked or hard to access in certain regions. So people often do this for Wikipedia and news sites and Google sites. And so sometimes you have to replace content in the response body if they hardcode domain names in the response body, because you're serving obviously on a different domain. And this is, I mean, this is fine. It's just, by the way, security software usually really hates that. So things like safe browsing and firewalls and stuff might detect, hey, you're serving the exact same content on this other domain name, maybe a domain name that's really well known. That's fishy, like literally it looks like phishing, so I'm going to block this. That can't happen, just so you know. But otherwise, this is a great way for a simple reverse proxy. A lot of these are probably unnecessary. This one is actually good if you're using replace. So you want to disable compression, because otherwise the replace has to work on the compressed body, or you have the performance penalty of decompressing it, doing the replace, and then recompressing it. So turning off compression can be helpful there. This is helpful so that the host header going up to google.com is google.com. I think these are probably unnecessary if I recall correctly. I don't know why these are in his config. We see this a lot. People put a lot of unnecessary header ups in their reverse proxy. Like this one is definitely unnecessary. I think this one is too. Anyway, don't put unnecessary stuff in your config. But he's getting this error that transform short internal buffer. Oh, that's fun. So I don't know exactly where that's coming from. Let's see if GitHub search will fail me here. Hey, it does. See, this is where I wish GitHub had source graph search built in. Maybe that message is coming from the transform package, short buffer. So maybe this is something I would need to like go into this package to figure out what the bug is. I do not know. Short internal buffer. Yeah, that's not an error message that I wrote, so it's probably something upstream. For the sake of time, I won't go into that in this live stream, but per host Prometheus metrics, I bet I know what this is about. This is a long, kind of pretty long open issue. Prometheus does not scale very well for dynamic host names. Just another +1 comment. Okay. The Ingress controller, there's some work going on with it. That's cool. This is a community-based project. We need more people involved in this, so if you want Kubernetes Ingress with Caddy, then get involved here. I don't do much with that because I don't have time and I don't use Kubernetes. Allow revocation list for client cert auth. Yes, so this is also a pretty long-standing issue. But it's like why use a CRL, and like, so for internal PKI, like what's the utility of a CRL? Okay, well, there is some utility, and so there's some discussion here. And someone said, I'm going to go ahead and implement it. And he wants to implement a streaming CRL parser so that a large CRL doesn't deplete your memory, because apparently the Go xlib one is like a block parser, will just read the whole thing. I hesitate here because I do not love the idea of like, so ASN1 parsing is really gnarly. There are dragons there, and I'm kind of against the idea of implementing a new parser and then using that. But this guy went ahead and he's doing it. And okay, so there's a lot here. This might be a topic for another live stream because there seems to be a lot here. So maybe we'll come back to that. But before finishing, I did want to I found a few things on Reddit randomly that it looks like Jellyfin users are asking for help with Caddy or something. So let's see here. He can't open ports 80 or 443. What options are there for the remote access? So just use Caddy on another port. I use Caddy just fine. And yes, that is the correct answer. I'm not logged in. That's fine. So then they go down this rabbit hole. What's your config? So this is a working Caddy file config for Jellyfin that doesn't use port 80 or 443. It's a higher port, but you just have to enable the DNS challenge because the other challenges that are on by default use ports 80 and 443. So if you don't want to open an external port, you need to configure the DNS challenge, and it's this simple, really. So yeah, we have documentation on that. Still can't access the domain. Oh, you're using Windows. So what's I don't really understand. This is like a random snippet of log. It looks fine. I don't see a problem here. He just says he can't access the domain. I don't really know what he means by that. Does that mean he's making a request and it's not connecting, or like, I don't really know. Like, what's this config? So there's a lot of questions here that we just need more details. This is why in our forum we have a help topic template, but I'm not going to get involved here on Reddit. Meanwhile, over on this thread, I'm trying to secure the server, register domain, and set up run Caddy using the Caddy v2 guide. So a very similar question, different user. So you can reverse proxy, different ports, how to do that. Yeah, it's in our documentation. Yeah, that's one way to do it. Set the global options. Caddy needs port 443. Yes, but you don't have to use this challenge. DNS challenge, more involved. More involved meaning one line of config and a plugin, but not too big a deal. Okay, well, I hope this was somewhat interesting. Let's see here. Yeah, hopefully that was somewhat interesting to you, and sorry this was maybe, I want to keep my live streams shorter. They probably are more desirable that way. Let me know your thoughts and feedback on Twitter or maybe in the chat. I don't know if you can comment after the video ends, but yeah. So thanks for joining today, for even tuning in for just a minute. Hopefully that was interesting. If you want to see more of this, I can also do more coding. I get a little nervous on camera. So, but I'm happy to do coding if you really want to watch someone write code. I think that's not super exciting, but I could definitely go through like the code with you. Like I'm just gonna, after I finish the stream, I'm gonna comment this and commit this. I got my Get Kraken open here with the changes. So yeah, I'm gonna do that once the stream ends, but let me know your thoughts and if you want to see more of this or see it a little differently.